In this video, I'm going to show you some secrets on how to use AI agents like top content creators do. What I see a lot on the internet is all these videos on AI agents, but unfortunately, a lot of people aren't really teaching how to control these agents to get really good quality. So what I'm going to do in this video is walk you through a automation on N8N. You can copy and follow along and build it with me. I'll also give you the template below the video for free. And before we do that though, I'm just going to actually show you in action so you can see what I'm going to be teaching and then you can do it with me. So one of the main things that I see people doing wrong when they're doing AI agents is they don't know how to control the agent. So what I'm going to teach you to do is how to actually use the proper modeling to control the agent and the outputs and the type of outputs that you get and when you'd want them. So in this example, I'm going to do an AI agent that's going to do deep research, like you're planning a piece of content as a content creator. So what it's going to do is it's going to do a live SERP, scrape SERP pages in Google, get all the results back, and it's going to harvest all the products on that results page. It's also then going to go and scrape and read the web pages themselves and get the content off there. And it's going to package that up into a report that we can use. So in this example, I'm just going to put a simple submission in here. But if you're building this out on a bigger application, you'd want to use something like Airtable or Supabase. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to submit a form. In the form, all I'm going to do is give it a product or an idea that I want to get the deep research done on. And then it's going to go to action and it's going to run different workflows to do it. So you'll notice over here, these two modules are actually running separate workflows. This workflow here is going to go live to Google and get all the results. This workflow here is actually going to load the pages and scrape the data, the content from the pages as part of the research. And what we're going to get out at the end of it, if I just look at the result I had here, I've got a report. So I started with the topic of hair loss products, hair loss shampoo, which is a product. And then I've got all of the popular products and their price points. So you can see in this report on the right, it's got all the prices of the popular products. So immediately I know what's happening in the market for this product. If I'm an e-commerce brand or I'm looking to start a new brand, I can find out all the competitors and all their price points. And I can also get top search results that I want to get, and then I can get a report written by the AI. Now this is a very simple example because I actually want to show you some of the techniques in this video to control AIs, but you can adapt this for whatever you want. So that's the result we're going to get, is we're going to get a report on hair loss shampoo, and then we're going to get the AI to formulate that for us. So when we're running separate workflows, what we do is we can run these simple execute another workflow from the first workflow. So I've got two that we're going to execute. So you haven't done this before in N8N. That's okay. I'm going to walk you through exactly how to do it all. So by the end of this video, you will know how to do it. So let's just take this for a bit of a run and you can see what's going on, and then we're going to build it together. So all I've got to do is go execute workflow. Now I've already submitted the form and pinned it, so I don't need to resubmit the form. So it knows that I want to find information about a hair loss shampoo or hair regrowth shampoo. So if I just click execute workflow, the model's got the keyword. It's now sent it over to the second workflow. So the second workflow has been executed and it's waiting for the results to come back from the second workflow back into our AI agent. It's finished that now. Now the agent's thinking again, and now it's firing the second workflow. So the second workflow is doing what we need it to do. Once the results come back from the second workflow, this agent's going to look at all this information and create the report, and it's going to give it us in a format that we can use, which is what the structured output pass is doing. So I'll just pause the video because it takes a little bit of time to scrape the web content, and then I'll come back once that's finished, and then we can carry on and build this together. Okay, the agent's finished doing what we needed it to do. We look in and there we go. There's our report with all the products, and we can tailor this to whatever we want. Again, this is an example, but what I want to zero in on is how we can actually control how the AI is writing this report for us. So one of the key things that people get wrong when they're using these agents is they're not actually sure how to control the model or what model to use at all. So there's a lot of nuances when using AI agents to control them to get different outcomes, and there's different use cases of when you would want those outcomes. So for example, the first thing is, what model do we choose here when we're running one of these agents? There's a lot of different models that we can choose. This is just ChatGPT that I've plugged in, but there's a whole lot of different models for ChatGPT. So the first question is, what are we trying to achieve and what model do we want? So if we look over here, before we actually build this out, which I'll show you in a second, let's just say I disconnected that model for a moment. I'm just going to look at the options of the models that I've got. You can see there's a lot of models that I could plug in. Those models are just the brain of the AI agent. So which brain do we choose? Well, mainly the ones that you'll go for are going to be OpenAI's model, Anthropic, which is the Claude model, And you might look at some of the Google Gemini models as well. DeepSeek and other models can be useful in some use cases, or Mistral and Llama. These Mistral and Llama ones are more when you want to self-host it. So if a client wants it self-hosted for privacy reasons, and they don't want their data going out to other LLMs, you can use these ones. But for mostly, 99% of people building these are going to use OpenAI and Anthropic. So if we look at OpenAI and we look at the models again that they can give us, let's just have a look about like what we want and what certain models that would be useful. So if we look down, sorry, I had to pause the video. I've got a bit of a cold and I was going to sneeze. If you look down the bottom list, there's these O3 models down here, O3, O1. So these are more reasoning models and they can be more expensive, but when you're coming up with ideas and wanting to do more of a deep research, these models can be really useful. If you want to do simple tasks, you could use the models that are more of the Geo Mini series, which is less complex, not reasoning models. Now, and then the other main ones you'll probably do if you're doing like content writing and stuff like this is going to be probably 4.1. So I encourage you to spend some time and look at the different models that OpenAI offers to understand why you'd want to use a certain model at a certain time. Now the next question is, why does it even matter other than just the functionality? The other thing is the cost. So when we run these models, they have different costs. So if I just open out of this now and close out of that rather, I'll just disconnect that. We are going to build this in just a second. I just want to drum home this point because it's really important. If you look in here, you can see, sorry, you can see in the JSON at below, it's got token usage. So you can see it's got prompt tokens, 14,000, completion tokens, 814. So this is telling me how much it's going to cost me to run that model. So there's a really handy site that we can use here, which is going to calculate the cost of running that model. So if I put in here those input tokens of 14,000 and output, I think it was 400, I can't quite remember. And it's just one API call that we did. So now we can get a rough idea. If I'm using this model of 4.1, that's going to cost me 3 cents to do that operation. And you can see the different models down here, like the O1 series down here, that would have cost me 23 cents to run that. So the reason you want to get used to these models and what they do and their costs is when you're building out larger production workflows and you're running this a lot for clients, it can make a huge difference. At the moment, you might think, well, 20 cents is no big deal. But when you run this like thousands of times, it becomes a big deal. So you want to make sure you understand, do I need to use this model in this scenario or not? Or could I use a cheaper model and reduce my costs? So example here, if I use GPT 4.1 mini, then it would be 1 cent compared to 4.1, which is 3 times the cost. So it's triple the cost. So for more simple tasks, you may better swap out the model and use 0.1 mini. So that's a little bit of a background on why it matters to choose the different models when you're running these AI agents. So it's the cost and it's the functionality. You need to decide what it is that you're going to do. Now, when you're doing this in an operation, you could make this more complex, and before you have this AI agent, you could have another inline model here, which would be a basic LLM chain like this. You could just put another model in between like that, which I'm not going to do now. But what you could do in a workflow is you could get this model to decide which agent, you could get this LLM chain here. Its task could be to decide which model is the best for the task that's coming up for this agent. And then it can automatically swap them out for you. But that's a little bit probably more complex than we need to do right now. So let's just simplify it. So for now, you need to choose the right model. So now let's build this out. And then I also want to show you, just before we build it out, I am going to get there. There's a couple other things that people completely overlook when they're running these models, which give you that fine-tuning control. So these are frequency, penalty, sampling, temperature, and the top P. So you can add these options down below, and this just gives you more control. So not only can you control the actual model, but then you can fine-tune that model more. So this is really important depending on the type of automation that you're running. So if you're doing this as a chat bot on a website or something like that, you don't want it to be too creative and come up with, get creative outside its guardrails, because that could be a little bit dangerous. So that's where you want to make sure that you control things like the sampling temperature and the top P, so you keep these very low. The higher these are, like the higher the temperature is, the more it can be creative. You're giving it more opportunity to be creative. Now, that doesn't mean it's just going to go totally wild and make up stuff, but it does mean that you got more chance of it doing that the higher this number becomes. So you could set that to 1 and then test your operation again and test the different outcomes that you get. Now, you might, when you're doing creative writing type of stuff, you might want that sampling high to give it that creative flair to change things around. And again, it really depends on what you're actually doing. And frequency penalty is just how much it can repeat words in the output. So if you keep it low, it crunches down the flexibility for the type of words and how much it can repeat them in the output. So that's another thing that you can add on. And top P is also more along the lines of how much it can be flexible on its creativity and producing results. So I encourage you to play around with these and dial them up and down on a very simple test. Put a simple test in of like a document or a chat bot and just play around with it till you see what sort of results you get up and down like that. They're really like dials to control the outcome that you're going to get. So let's just hop out of here for a second. Now we can run this automation and then we can see what sort of results we get when we play around with these things. So the first thing you're going to do is just going to add a form submission. So go on the right hand side and just go form, N8N form. Open the form up, and here it's just a simple example. We just name the form, and all we're going to do in the field here is just call it topic. It's a text element, and then we just leave it like that. What this allows us to do when we test this workflow, I'll just cut that off for a second. When I execute that workflow, it's going to open up. Oh, I had it pinned, so it's not going to do it, but I'll do that again. It's going to open up a form that'll allow me to execute the workflow from a form. This can be quite handy when you're doing testing, if you just want to test it quickly without putting it into a bigger workflow. So that's how you get the form, and then you want to connect it to this agent. So to get an AI agent in N8N, just go AI agent on the side. Let's just spell that wrong. And you can see it says AI agent over there. So put AI agent in here. Then we've talked about connecting the brain model. In order to connect that brain, you need an account in OpenAI. So you have to go to OpenAI, get an account, and then you need to get your API credentials. So when you open that up, you actually need to get your credentials in here. So I'm not going to go in to do that in a video. There's heaps of videos on YouTube on how to connect your credentials, but you need your API key, plug it in and save it, and then it's saved in here for you to use all these different models. So now that that's connected, the next thing we're going to do is run these sub workflows. So in order to run a sub workflow off of a main agent, now, first of all, the question would be, why would you want to do that? In this simple example, it's not super necessary. We could have done everything in this video without actually using an agent. We could have just done it inline with one of those basic LLM chains. We didn't necessarily need to call these workflows. But if you've got a more complex operation going on, then you may want to call a separate workflow, because you don't want to overload one agent with too many tasks. If you end up having 15 different tools down here and your prompt becomes so massive, it's maxed out the tokens that you're allowed to input it can get difficult and the agent can start making mistakes. So sometimes it's better to separate it and just let another workflow deal with that operation, and then the result will be pulled back, and then let this agent process that result. So in order to do this, all you have to do is click on the tool here and go call N8N workflow like that. And then you open it up, and then it's going to ask you, well, which workflow am I calling? So at the moment, we wouldn't have set up a workflow, so it's not there. But once you set up that workflow, in that drop-down menu, it will appear and you can choose it. So that's all you need to do. So you do this twice for the two different workflows. So now let me take you through what these workflows are and how I set them up, and then you can connect them up on your one. So in order to set up the workflows, we're going to go over here and set up a new workflow. So we have a new canvas. Go to the plus symbol up here and just click and type in, no, it's not when, I think it's workflow. Sometimes N8N's search function over here isn't great. Execute sub workflow is what it's called. So you click that, open it up, and all you need to do in here is fill in what you want to pull in from the original workflow. So in this scenario, what we're doing is we're going to use a service called Data for SEO, and that's going to go live on Google, do a Google search with our keyword, and it's going to get all the results of the Google page, right? So the thing that it needs to do that is the search term. So we need to pass that search term through. So the field that we put in here is a search term and it's a string. That's all you need to do. It's really quite straightforward. So what that means is from this workflow here, this agent, when it calls this tool, it's going to pass the original search topic right through to this tool, and it's going to get passed right through to here. So once we've got it in here like this, and then we just need to call this Data for SEO service, clean up the data, and that's all we need to do. And that'll automatically get sent back to the first workflow. So in order to do the Data for SEO feed, we just need to do an HTTP module. So go HTTP like that. In here, we need to put in these credentials for Data for SEO. So let me just show you what Data for SEO is for those of you who don't know what it is. Data for SEO is a huge database of keyword information from Google. So if you go in here and log in and get an account, I think they give you some free credits that you can use. Once you're in here, you need to get your API key. So go to API key. And once you're in API key, you can go to the playground and see all the different endpoints that they'll allow you to pull data from. So one of them is a Google search results page that we can pull data from. They'll show you how to set up everything if you look at the code example. So whatever endpoint that you're using here, you just go to the code example and they'll give it to you. So some of you may never have done something like this before, but don't let it intimidate you. I'll walk you through how to do it now. What you need to do in this HTTP module is you need to set the method to post, the URL exactly like this as I've got on the screen. Then the authentication, go generic type, header authentication, and then you're going to need to put your API credentials in here in order for this to work. Okay, so obviously I've already got mine saved, so I'm not going to do it again, but you would be setting up a new credential, and you need to put in here the key, the authorization, and then the API key here. Over at Data for SEO, they walk you through how to do that. You need to get your API access key up here. First thing you need to do. Once you've got that, if you click the code example in the right endpoint, they'll show you how to set it up. So the endpoint that we're getting is this search one, SERP result. So this is the one that we're using here. So when you're in the API playground here, you can set the parameters to whatever country you want. So let's just set it to United States like this, and we'll just leave everything else the way it is. And then if you click here, request, it'll actually do the result, we'll go and do the search for you, but you need to put the target keyword in. But what you really want is just that code example box at the bottom. I'm not going to click that now because I think my API key will be showing, but if you just click that, it actually gives you the JSON structure that you need to plug in back over here. And so once and it shows you what to put in here as well, in the authentication. You need to put in the fields in here to authenticate that. So once you've got that connected up like that, down below we put send headers to slide it to green using the fields below, and we put in that name, content type, just like I've got, and then application JSON. Pay attention to capitalization. And then down below we put send body, and we put JSON using the JSON below. And then this is where, when you looked at that code example, they would have shown you in Data for SEO, this is how the body needs to be sent over like that. So all you have to do is paste it like this, and then you map in the actual search term that we got from that executed workflow. So you can see here, the search term is in here. I just drag and drop that straight in there and it's green. And then that is going to know what search term, when we run this, to actually send to Data for SEO. That's all you need to do. Once you do that and it's set up, you can see on the result, Data for SEO pulls this big feed of information for us, which is really handy stuff. It's huge feed of data. So I'm going to get out of there. And then over here, I've just added a simple code node to clean up that data. So to do that, I'm just going to go over on the side and put code like that, code node. In here, it's just some JavaScript JavaScript in this code node that's going to clean up the data that came from Data for SEO and just extract what I wanted out of that. So I only wanted certain fields. There's too much information, so I just narrowed it down to popular product elements, and then I also narrowed it down to the top search results pages. So that's where I got that information from. I'm not going to run this now, but that's all I needed to do. I'll give you this below the video so you've got it anyway. Once this finishes doing its run, it automatically sends this information back to this agent for us. So that's how you do the first call. And the second one's very similar. It's just using a different service. So let's set up the second one. The second one is even more easy. Exactly the same thing we did first. The only difference is this time we're passing the URL, not the keyword. So it's still a string, but we're passing the URL through. So that's what we want to send through, because we wanted, in this simple example, all I'm doing, and again, you wouldn't use it like this in a proper production workflow because it's just not actually doing that much useful stuff here, but it's just for an example. It's just going to search one URL, the first URL it got, and scrape it for us. But obviously, if you're doing this in a more complex way, you might want to scrape 10, 20, 30 pages. But in order to scrape a web page, there's a service called Gina AI, which I've used quite a bit. And you can give it a URL and it will go and scrape it and give it back to you in a clean format that you can then pass back to the AI agent. So in order to use Gina, it's the same sort of thing. You just need another HTTP request over on the side. So HTTP like that. And then you just need to put your credentials in here. So this method is get. The URL is like this. Notice on the URL, I actually have to map in dynamically the URL that I got from here. So I have to map that in like that. And then the credential type is header auth, and then it's the same thing again. You need to set up new credentials in here, just like for data for SEO. So in order to do that, I'll show you how to do that in just a second. In order to do that, you need to go to Gina AI over here. In order to do that, you need to go to Gina AI over here. I'll probably have to blur some stuff out because Gina kindly puts my API key right on the screen, I think. So what you do over here is you want to go to the side, or first you got to get your API key up there, manage your API key. So get that. You're going to need that to plug in and make sure your credentials are connected. Once you've done that, you just go to the service called Reader, like this, and then you click on this box here. And this is going to be the box that we need to scrape a web page. So all you have to do is copy this, what they call the curl command, CURL command, like that. If you just copy that, you'll see it's got two H's, H for authorization and H for, it says X respond with. And you can play around on the left-hand side and control the sort of things that Gina's going to scrape off a web page for you. But for this example, I'm going to keep it simple and just leave it as the default. But this is how you get the information that you need to plug into this HTTP request. So once you've done that, you send headers to green, you put the name to accept and then application JSON, and then you have authorization, then you have the word bearer with a space, and then this is where you put the API key that Gina gives you, like that. And then these are the other fields that you need to enter in here if you want to get more accurate information. Now you don't have to do all of these things that I did, but I've just told it I don't want images, I want text in the format. And these extra fields is how you can control Gina. So I've got X retain images, X return format rather. So I've duplicated that one, but you can see I'm telling it what I want and what I don't want. So you can play around with that, but basically you could just leave it at the default and leave it exactly like that. Once you've done that, Gina will then know that you want to scrape that web page and return the content. And that's all that's doing. It's really quite straightforward. Grabs the URL, scrapes the page, sends it back to the agent. So that's how we can set up the second workflow here. So now this agent will get the scraped web page back and it will get the results from data for SEO. And then we need to give this agent instructions so it knows what to do. So let's have a look quickly at that, and then we're going to go back to those settings. So the first, sorry, just to hop out of there, the first thing we need to do is just give it the user image. The user message here is just going to be this topic that we put in that comes from here. So when you test that, you'll be able to map that in directly into that. Once that's fired, you'll be able to map that and that topic straight into there, and you set that to expression. So then we're going to look at the system prompt in here. So the system prompt is telling it exactly how we want it to do things. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this and read every word. I'll just give you a quick overview of how I've structured this. So I've given it a task. I've told it the topic. I've told it what I want it to do. I've told it that it has a tool called Data for SEO, which is a second workflow that's going to return the data in a format like this, which is what that code node does. And then I said there might be multiple results for this. For these different results here, not just one. And then I've given it a workflow step by step. So I said step 1, trigger the second workflow for data for SEO. Step 2, when you get the results back from the second workflow, you must process it. And then I said you need to, or I told it what the type, what these things are that it's getting back. So it's got popular products. I said these are all the popular products, so you can include them in your report. These are the organic results. So I just explain to it what is this stuff that you're getting back, so it has some context. Otherwise, it's not going to do a very good job with it. So, and then what I say in here is you need to extract the URL from organic. So what I'm saying is, in these organic results you get back, I want you to extract the URL from the first results, really all it's going to do. I could have done many, but I'm just doing one for an example. But I'm saying grab the URL and extract it. Grab it, then call the second workflow called Gina and send that URL to the second workflow. Then step 4, you'll receive back from Gina Tools, scrape web content from the top search engine results pages, read through the content and use this as research when creating your report. So then I said these are the tools, data for SEO, and I've explained what the tool does, Gina, and I've explained what the tool does, and then I've asked it to output it in this format for me. So now the agent has everything that we need it to have, and then I'm going to give it a structured output parser, which is just telling it how I want the report structured. So I want topic, popular product, search engine results, and key insights. So in order to add the structured parser on, if I hop in here again, you just slide that to require specific output format like that. So once that's on there, now the agent knows how we want it extracted. It's got the source material that it needs, and then it can run its operation. So the key thing that you really want to take away from this is how to control the agent. Like I said at the beginning of this video, we can run these workflows, it can get input data to create a report for us, but really what we want to focus on is which model should we use and when, because you're going to get vastly different results and different costs. A lot of people I see don't understand the different models, and they end up using really expensive models all the time when they didn't really need to. You could easily, on a simple thing, and you could probably do it for this, just use a GPU 4.1 mini and get similar results. So I could also dial down the temperature down here if I wanted to, or dial it up if I wanted to, depending on what I want to do. So you'll get some pretty more creative outputs when you put these up though. So you have to be careful with these, but sometimes that can actually get a better result in a writing type of automation. But if you're doing this as, like I said earlier, as a chat bot for customer service, you don't want it getting too creative. So you have to be careful with these things. But these are the settings that most people completely overlook when they're setting up these agents. They don't pay attention to them, and you can get vastly different results. So there you have an automation. Just to recap what we went through, we had a quick form submission. We set up an AI agent. We gave it a couple of tools, which are other workflows for it to get information when doing research for us. We told it what sort of output we wanted to give it to us in. And then we controlled, and we can play around with the different models and the different settings to fine tune that AI agent depending on the task that we're doing, to either reduce costs, change the type of format that we're getting, the style rather, in the output that we're getting. So these are some of the more advanced things that people don't talk about enough when they're doing AI agents. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, do me a huge favor, hit the like button, leave me a comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.